To understand my story, you sort of have to know a tiny bit about trespassing laws in our country, and that we don't have any so long as you're respectful and not destructive. You can walk over any hills that you like, and in my case, camp on any beach if you're choosing, as long as you leave the area how you found it. I used to love camping when I was little. Our family would go multiple times a year with a large group of my parents' friends and their kids. On average, there were maybe 10 of us at a time, which was a bit of a logistical challenge, since we always headed out to this one really remote beach on the coast. Actually, we weren't the only ones. There were always yachts bobbing just off the shore with people in them, and other campers lining up and down the beach. Most of them also had children or teenagers, so it wasn't a wild party scene. It was very much an informal, family holiday spot. There was even a small building with toilets and showers installed nearby, even though this was in the middle of nowhere. I guess the local council must have figured out and got sick of people peeing behind bushes. We took a trip up in the spring of 2011. I'm really bad with time, but I know this because I got my dog in the winter of 2010. After picking her out that November from the shelter, as a birthday gift from me to me, as I paid her adoption fee. Everyone, I know you love dogs and she will be very important to the story later, so let me tell you a little bit about Parmesan. Parmesan came to me as a 6-month-old puppy who had been rescued from a dogfighting situation. We're not entirely sure what breed she is exactly, but my best guess is a lurcher Staffy mix. She is a wonderfully well-tempered dog, with people than most dogs, but you absolutely do not threaten her, and she'll have you. So, by the time of this camping trip, I had had Parmesan for a few months. She had never come camping with us before, but far as my family are concerned, dogs go on camping trips. So, when we all piled into the car, she came too. Unusually though, none of my family friends could make it, so it was only me, my sister, my dad, and my mom. I didn't mind. I wasn't that attached to the other kids. I would rather play with my dog and I would still have my sister. The drive took the best part of 6 hours, and because we had left a bit later, although I don't remember why we had left later than normal, we arrived at sunset. Not a good time to be building a tent, but we expected to arrive to other campers already set up, and the beach illuminated in campfires. The beach was empty. In spite of this, my parents started taking stuff out and they were trying to build the tent. They asked us to fetch some of the lighter bags from the boot of the car, while they sat pointing a flashlight at the sand to see properly. I rolled down the window of the car for Parmesan before getting out. It was pretty hot for that time of year, and I wanted her to have some air. You always gotta be looking out for my little furry homie. As we're fumbling about in the dark, on a beach in the middle of nowhere, it is pretty spooky. The one road that led to this beach was circular, and had a bridge over the water, meaning you could basically circle around the beach like a big zero shape if you felt like it. I wasn't really paying any attention to the road. I was complaining that I was tired, as kids usually are. After maybe 15 minutes of my dad trying to nail the tent into the sand, my mom's asking him had he seen that car drive around. It had been a few times. My dad kind of shrugged her off. He's sort of like that. I don't know if he said anything back to her, but after a few more minutes, a car pulled up next to ours on the road and someone got out. It was maybe 15 or 20 feet from the cars to where we were, and the light was pretty low, except for the torches. We weren't expecting to see anyone else out here at this point, and I think my mom said that it must be the security. I don't know why a random beach would have security. I think what she meant was the wildlife trust or something, as they do occasionally come down to do their nosy work. The guy was walking pretty unevenly. He must have been drunk or high because he had that stagger to him. There was absolutely no way this guy was sober. Cool, a junkie. Not an unusual find, but it's rare to see them out here. As he walked into flashlight range, we realized he was carrying a large knife, maybe 15 inches. Although I was small at the time, so maybe my sense of scale was way off. I don't like my dad, but credit to him, once he saw this, he got up immediately, holding on to the camping mallet, and he put all of us behind him. The man began to shout wildly at us that we can't camp here, and that he was just letting us know. My dad tried to initially be a bit low-key with the guy, and told him that that was fine, that we would leave, but this didn't work. He kept coming closer to us, so my dad started shouting, and the man kept shouting back. My sister and I were crying. I remember shaking. I was utterly terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be in that situation. It really did seem like this guy and my dad were going to fight, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't fancy my dad's chances. While it's grim to consider, I am absolutely convinced he would have killed my dad, and possibly us as well, once he was done, as I don't think my mother would have had the common sense to run with us. I love her, but she's always put Dad and her relationship with him above us. This isn't how it went down. A bolt from the black like a wolf descending on its prey took us all by surprise. Most of all, the man with the knife. In that moment, Parmesan was the apex predator large canines represent in nature. She got him good by the arm and clamped down hard, ripping his jacket and shredding the skin underneath. He dropped the knife as it had been in the arm that she had got him by. He kicked her, he punched her, and he eventually got her off. He grabbed the knife from the sand and ran back to his car and drove off. Parmesan didn't follow him. She stayed with us, muzzle covered in blood. Quickly as we could, we gathered our things and all got back in the car, all pretty shook up by the incident. I looked Parmy over. She was okay, but the car's window was much more open than I had left it. We think that what happened was when the shouting started, she must have put the paw up on the gap that I had left for her. As it was an old car, and it had the roll-down windows and not an electric button, we think that she must have been able to hit it with her paw to force it down enough to squeeze out. This is not the end of my story though. We were all pretty scared, and since we had the dog with us, we couldn't book a hotel for the night. My parents just decided to drive home, so we could all feel safe. But first, we had to drive to the nearest town for petrol, as we were kind of low. I spent the time trying to clean Parmesan up a little. I had always loved dogs, but what she had just done for me blew my mind. As we drove into town, we came across a petrol station, but it looked closed. My dad drove up closer to get a better look, and stuck his head out the window to get a better look at the sign. My mom asked him what on earth he was doing, and he told her that he was trying to see when it opens. Never. My heart sank. Parked in the corner behind a van, so we hadn't seen him at first, was the man with the knife. He was sitting on the back of his car, using some tissue paper to clean up his arm. It looked pretty bad. Without stopping to refuel or look anywhere else in town, my dad drove right out of there. He decided to go to the next town over, but this was removed. The next town was over 60 miles away. We didn't have enough petrol to get there, we had realized, but we began driving. We were going to break down. That's fine, my dad said. We had AA cover. They would come tow us home, or at least to somewhere acceptable for the night. Better than staying in the last town. After driving for maybe 5 minutes, lights flash us from behind. Another car. The same car the man had been driving. It was him following us. He must have realized that we were low on petrol. The next half hour was one of the worst half hours of my life. I had a complete and utter breakdown, as did everyone else really. I could tell my parents were trying to keep it under wraps so it wouldn't upset us, but we weren't really little kids. We were both double digits by then. We knew how dangerous this situation was. Dad turned off the radio to conserve petrol, and the man followed us for 55 miles before he had peeled away onto another road. Our fuel meter was on the big ready for empty for the last 10 miles. We were driving on fumes. I don't really believe in God, but if he does exist, that was definitely one of his miracles. Once we got there, we drove into a petrol station, and we filled to a full tank before driving the rest of the way home. My sister and I slept after that. I only woke up once when we had made it all the way home. Just grateful nothing worse had happened than that. After getting some sleep, my mom phoned the non-emergency line for the police and reported what had happened. They never got back to her after that, but apparently the woman she spoke to said they may have wished to in the future, as he had matched the description given of a suspect wanted in relation to a murder charge. I have no idea if he was actually the guy or just a random psycho. As I said, they never got back to her. So, what's the takeaway then? Other than a crazy man on the beach and hopefully we don't see them again. Well, for me, it's that I love Parmesan. She's still with us now. Old as the hills and twice as grizzled as one of my mom's friends likes to joke. I don't know why she did what she did that day. I couldn't tell you what her thought process was. What I do know is that this poor puppy was born into an environment where they had abused and neglected her, only to be rescued and taken to a shelter where her mother and siblings all found homes before her. Despite how badly people had treated her, when I took her home, she forgave but never forgot. I think the saying is I never trust a person who doesn't like a dog, but I always trust a dog when they don't like a person. They have a very good understanding of human body language, and I think she must have understood how much danger we were in. If you're able to, please adopt. You might find yourself in a situation like mine one day. I promise you, if you're willing to save a four-legged friend's life, they will pay you back tenfold if they're able to, without a thought for their own safety. I paid £78 for Parmesan's adoption fee, which is a lot when you're a kid, but it chills me to the bone knowing if I hadn't been so instant on the dog, I might be dead. For some more background information, I live in Scotland and this happened in the Highlands. It's fairly remotely. The drive took so long because we always used this one really specific beach and the car was loaded down with camping supplies, 2 small children and a dog. So the car was heavier than normal, and bathroom breaks were pretty frequent. You've all had to go on the side of the motorway, don't at me. We didn't phone the police while being followed because we had no phone signal, or so my mom said, but I suspect the genuine reason was that there was weed in the car. My parents used to smoke and deal. I didn't include this in the original story because it didn't affect my experience of the story. I was a little kid and I was telling it from my perspective. Regardless, thank you guys all so much. So, me and my boyfriend, his best friend, and his girlfriend drove up to Big Bear on 626. And then a day later, another friend of ours drove up, and he was supposed to sleep downstairs and the couples would sleep upstairs, since there were only 2 bedrooms. The first night that we stayed there was kind of creepy because The cabin was pretty remote, and of course, there's absolutely no lights outside. It is the woods with coyotes howling and bears, but nonetheless, completely normal activity. On the 27th around 12 a.m., my boyfriend are in bed, when suddenly our friend sleeping downstairs comes banging on the door freaking out, saying that he saw shadows in the woods, and that the motion light came on and there was a thumping outside. We got a little freaked out, but my boyfriend got out of bed, and he checked the entire cabin and he even went outside. There was nothing. We go up to the other couple's room where there's a porch with a sliding glass door that looks out to the woods. It's important to note that I am a naturally very anxious and scared person, while my boyfriend is a rock. He is calm and logical while I tend to jump to the worst scenario. My boyfriend goes over to check the last place inside the cabin. So he pulls the curtain and he jumps and yells, "Oh my god." At this point I'm terrified. My boyfriend is 180, a CrossFit coach, and to see a big guy like that scared is nauseating. He locked the door and he backed away slowly. He quietly says, "There's a large man standing outside staring at us. He's just standing in the woods looking at us." At this point, I think that he's messing with me. He looks at me and says, "Go lock the door." That's when I knew that he was serious. Everyone is freaking out. I run and lock the door behind us and we all decide to stay in the room to keep an eye out. It's the middle of the summer and it's really hot, but we refuse to open a window. I'm so scared but try not to show it, as everyone else seemed to have calmed down. About 30 minutes goes by and nothing happens. I get annoyed with the heat and the fact that there are 5 people in a tiny room, and 3 of them are men, so my boyfriend and I go back to our room. I'm still pretty scared at this point, so my boyfriend tries to cheer me up. By now it's around 1:30 in the morning. I told him that I was too scared to sleep with the lights off. He tells me that's totally fine and he understands, so we just lay there with the lights completely on. Finally, I start drifting off to sleep when I hear a thud. I sit up and look at my boyfriend. He looks at me. And then the power cuts out. I immediately start sobbing. I'm trembling and I can't see anything because it's pitch black. I try to get out of bed and run, but my legs get tangled in the sheets and I fall. My boyfriend picks me up and we grab our phone and run to the other room where everyone else was staying. I'm hysterical at this point. I try to contact our host, but nothing will go through. I try to call my dad, but all of our phones say no service. We're alone out there. Thank God the friend who drove up after us had a different carrier because his phone had 1 bar, so he called the local sheriff. I realize now it's a bit of an overreaction, but at the time, we thought we were gonna die. He's on the phone with the sheriff and they transfer us to the utilities company. We give the address and they tell us that we are too far into the woods and that they don't cover our area. At this point, we are wondering if the entire area has no power, or if the man outside had just cut the power. I cry more and we call 911 to report suspicious activity and a power outage. They send the fire department. A few hours go by and it's 3 a.m. and suddenly the power comes back on. We all fall asleep and the next day we talk to some of the locals of the area. We told them that our power had went out and he said that was strange and it shouldn't have happened. He told us the only reason that happens out here is because of a snowstorm. He said that he couldn't explain it.